So, um, wait. Okay, so what gives you the like? You see a plant. What gives you the right to come to that plant, to kill it, and then to eat it?
Well, as a vegan, my moral philosophy is to make those practical choices that are reasonably available to me to mitigate suffering. And given that plants, even if they were sentient, would suffer less than animals, and we know that, the reasonable choice is to eat plants instead of animals.
Right, but like you, I think it's even more than sentience. It's like killing another life.
Well, so first, if that's going to be your standpoint, we have to establish that killing is wrong.
Yes.
It's my stance that unjustified killing is wrong.
Well, what gives you the justification to kill a plant?
My own self-defense and self-preservation.
So you put yourself above plants.
I put myself above all living things.
All what?
All living things.
Even like you put yourself above all plants, animals, human beings.
My personal self, yes, I don't put all humans above them. I do put my personal self-preservation, and my will to live above other humans, animals, plants.
Right, but what if you could not kill plants?
Well, that would be a different proposition now, wouldn't it? Are you saying
Not
if I was
really.
physically unable to kill plants?
No. I mean, I'm talking about legitimacy.
Can you go into that a little more?
Yeah. So, like, right now, you're eating plants. I don't know, you're making a salad and all that. So you've chosen to, um, you know, leave animals alone, quote unquote, and now you eat plants.
Yes.
But by doing that, you're still killing all those plants.
Yeah, my proposition was never that killing is wrong. Unjustified killing is wrong. Killing is justified when it's in self-defense. So if an animal was attacking me and I shoved it off of me and it died because of that, that would be justified killing. Same thing with a plant. If I'm on death's doorstep and I need to eat, and humans do need to eat pretty often, that's justified killing.
Right, but I mean, do you believe in relative morals?
Why don't you go ahead and explain it to me?
Well, I mean, you can have a moral rule that applies to any case, or can have moral rules that one case I'm going to do that, and one case I'm going to do this.
Oh, I don't think this is relative. I believe that all unjustified killing is wrong. Only justified killing is acceptable.
Right, but you still have the condition that has to be justified.
Right.
It's the same thing as like saying like all like it's almost like a simple solution. It's almost like for example, you would have the moral that to be good, that would be the moral, but then you would add, oh, all justified goodness is good, but unjustified I won't do it, right? It's kind of like it just goes into it just leaves the way for you.
Well, unjustified actions, if we take out reason and justification, is just chaos and randomness, and that's not really immoral now, is it?
That would be if you need to put a rationale beyond just the rule.
I mean, rules are based off of rationales. Otherwise, they're just nonsense.
Sure, but there's also a difference between, doing morals by, calculating the utility and doing morals, Like,
I mean, you want to talk about utility in eating plants, it's very hard to find a efficient means of caloric intake. I
I'm
have to kill
saying
far fewer plants than I do animals to get the same caloric intake.
if you're doing calculations to base your morals, I'm just saying like your morals are all relative.
Oh, I personally am not a utilitarian. If that's the route we want to go down, it's still justified.
But I mean, like, is calculating the justification not being an utilitarian? Because your justification is, oh, I'm going to preserve this and this and that because it's almost like a calculus.
I mean, if that's the kind of moral you want to use, it's still justified. It's not my personal ethic, but I think it says something that it works under both kinds of thought.
I want to make it very clear, like when I'm like describing this morals, like that's not my morals. Like I'm just like uh saying that what you're saying, you know, is a relative moral.
That unjustified killing is wrong.
Yeah,
Okay, so what is the consequence of it being a relative moral then? If I accept that,
I mean the consequence is that you don't have absolute morals. You only have relative morals.
and so how does that prove that eating plants is wrong?
Well, um, well, morals. I mean, I think should be absolute. You cannot have morals. One day it's like that, one day it's not like that.
Oh, every single day it's like that though. If you can't justify the killing, it's wrong. That's the rule.
Yeah, but your rule is not about the action, it's about the circumstance. That's what I'm saying.
Yes, and
And so it means that you're making morals, but it's always based on sort of a calculation.
I mean, there's no way we can remove ourselves from circumstances. All practical decisions have to take into account the circumstances. We don't exist in a vacuum.
No, we can. You have rules about your actions. You
Okay,
control
so then it
yourself.
goes back to my original point then as a vegan, I make all decisions, all practical decisions to ameliorate as much suffering as I reasonably can. And the best way for me to do that is to eat plants. If I were to eat animals, those
Okay.
animals would have to eat plants, and then I'd have to eat the animals, and that's, exponentially more plants that I would have to kill.
Well, but I mean, I don't think it's moral either to eat animals.
Well, me neither, because it's immoral to eat plants.
Well, you just said it.
Well, sorry, I misspoke. It's immoral to unjustifiably kill plants, but there are plenty of plants you can eat without killing them. But the moral decision is to kill as few plants as possible.
Okay, so how is that moral?
To kill as few plants as possible
Yeah.
under a vegan ethic is to ameliorate as much suffering as you reasonably can.
Like, how is that moral and not you just, calculating your way to good conscience?
Are you just asking me what morality is?
I mean, I think what your definition of morality is part of the question.
To alleviate as much suffering as reasonably possible.
That's your morality. So like that would be based on a calculation.
Right. I'm still not seeing how using calculations is proving your point.
No, I'm saying like if your morals are based on calculations, like you can make whatever calculations you want. It's not about like one day you might like you. It means your morality is not defined.
I don't know that we've established that.
Well, I mean, if you're doing calculations and you have your own rule that you follow, well, whatever might take you this day, you might actually, it might seem reasonable and it might seem justified in your moment, right? Because what is justified is what you deem justified.
Okay. I'm just saying the practical reality is that things change day to day. Today, I might be, I might have a whole treasure trove of energy and possibilities, but tomorrow may not necessarily be the same. And that's how we make decisions. What is morality if it's not being used?
Morality is making the right thing,
It's making the right choice.
not the right thing. Like morality is not really about choice. Morality is something you follow.
In your choices.
I mean, if you see like the reality as like a branch of choices, then yes. But
Right. And so when
like,
I make choices, I have to consider the facts that go into those choices.
okay, so for example, like if you had a body that did not need food, would you eat plants?
If I had a body that didn't need, so if I was a cyborg.
I didn't say cyborg.
Okay, so if I had a body that didn't need food, would I eat plants? Nope.
Yeah. So see, it's wrong to eat plants.
It's just inefficient.
What do you mean?
I mean, why would I spend time cooking a meal with plants or animals or rocks or anything for that
Oh, I
reason if
see.
I didn't
Okay, I
need
see. I
food?
see. Yeah. Okay. So would you kill plants?
Just for fun?
I mean, not even for fun. Just like, would you kill plants?
Like, would I be able to? Would my existence? What is your
No,
question?
I'm still talking about like, would it be legitimate for you to kill a plant?
For what reason?
Like, just like there's not even like a circumstance, but like if you were, completely self-sufficient, you did not need to kill or do anything to survive, would you think it would be right to kill plants?
If I didn't need anything to survive and I just existed off of atmosphere, would it be wrong to kill plants? Is that what you're asking?
I mean, like you talked about the cyborg, you talked about atmosphere, like you're trying to find sort of a a fictional reality where it would be uh reasonable to have this reality, but it's not really about like if you can imagine or not. It's like just like taking yourself as like someone who did not need to eat, someone who was sufficient, and then you asking yourself, in that case, would I still kill plants?
No, I'd have to have a reason to do things.
So because like plants are part of life, if you kill plants, you're killing life.
Okay. It goes back to my original premise that killing isn't wrong. Unjustified killing is wrong. If I have no reason to kill, then killing anything would be wrong. But I think circling back to the central premise of the debate is it's not inconsistent to kill plants and not kill animals.
What do you think that adds to the?
Say that again?
Like, I don't get like what are you trying to say like with this phrase?
That it's consistent to kill plants and not animals. It's morally consistent to kill plants and not animals.
Oh, okay, yeah. But I mean, like, you could say that, but like, at the same time, the debate is not really about like the comparison between animals and plants.
I was under the impression it was.
Well, let me check the proposition. I mean, you know, if you're referring to the fact that we talked about like we compared animals and plants before, that is true, but like I don't think the question has any sort of like
Stone, can we get a clarification? Was the debate premise whether it's okay to kill, or it's wrong to kill plants and animals?
Kill.
It's immoral to kill plants. Okay. Okay. All right, so it's totally acceptable to eat plants because even if you did have to kill them to eat them, that would be justifiable because it's you're allowed to keep yourself alive, but there are plenty of plants you can eat without killing the plant.
Okay, so what makes it justified to eat plants? Not prevents
It
you
makes
from
I'm
eating
justified
animals.
to eat plants because it keeps me alive. And my first primary interest is self-preservation and staying alive. My second justification is I have yet to see any proof that plants can feel suffering. But even so, if they can, it reduces suffering to eat plants instead of animals, because if I chose to eat animals, those animals in turn would have to eat plants, and so I would be spreading even more suffering. So there's three easy justifications. And that's assuming that I kill the plants to eat them, which is not necessarily true.
Sure. So 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 in both cases, a life would be dead, but because in one case there's suffering, you don't like it.
No, because it's not the suffering that matters, it's the justification for killing.
But then
But that's
why are
not
you
the
talking
premise
about
even.
suffering?
There's it's the premise that it's wrong to eat plants. What if I ate dead plants? That's not wrong.
Okay, so are you not buying them at the supermarket?
Right now I actually am not buying them at the supermarket, but for the sake of argument, sure.
Well, then you're financing an industry that kills plants. So you might say my hands are not dirty, but are you really distant from all the killing?
Listen, the question isn't or not whether I'm acting morally. We're talking about whether or not it's moral in general. And it's totally perceivable that somebody has their garden and they trim the plants without killing them and then eat them. And then when the plants die, they eat the dead plants. No harm, no suffering, no killing at all.
So if we're talking about eating in general, like that would be my case before, where I would say if you did not need plants to survive, then would you eat them? And you said no, right? So you need out of utility, and so generally you would not eat plants. So that would be the general case, not that someone could actually leave their plants die and then eat them.
People do that. That's a thing.
People do that, but if you want to talk about like a general, like a real generalized case, that would be that you would not eat plants if you like. If I compare your justification, which is that you need it because of their utility for your body, if I compare that to like the case where generally speaking you would not eat plants, which you said if you didn't have utility, then that means that generally speaking you would not eat plants because of the utility you're eating them. That would be the generalized case.
All right.
Right. So then if you want to talk about generalized case, generally speaking, you would not eat plants, but because you need utility out of selfishness, you would go and eat plants.
Ooh, not selfishness, self-preservation.
Is that not selfishness?
No, because to be selfish, I mean, you know what? Why not? Why not? I'll let you have that one.
Right. So okay. So then that is why I said, for example, in the precise case, like um so yeah, so there was also like in the precise case, like so one I asked you like what makes the difference between you eating plants and animals, and then you said like, oh, because of suffering, because of all that, and then you said no, it's because of justification. So is suffering part of the justification or not?
It can be multiple things.
Okay.
Suffering can be a justification, but if suffering doesn't work for you, let's go utility. I get more caloric intake faster by eating plants.
You take what? Sorry.
I can gather more energy. I use less energy to gather and eat plants, and I gain more energy from eating plants than I could from animals. It's more efficient for plants.
When you say I use less energy to gather like plants, are you talking like are you gathering plants?
I mean, we can take it from the garden sense of it takes less energy for me to plant a seed, grow a plant, and harvest the plant than it does for me to buy an animal, raise an animal, butcher the animal, cook the animal, and eat the animal. Or we could go from the real world energy standpoint of it uses less fossil fuels and it uses less time, it uses less manpower to grow and harvest crops on a large industrial scale than it does for animals.
Right. Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I see what you're saying. Okay. But so that would be yeah. Um. Right. Because like the plants, like an animal would eat more kilograms of plants to feed himself than uh, you know, like if you were to feed humans instead of like feeding animals to then feed the animals to human, like the
Cutting out
case
the
where you
middleman.
what?
Just cutting out the middleman.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think that's valid, but um, so that would be your justification for eating
It is
like
a justification.
so that's part of your argument, right?
Right.
Okay. Well, let me give me like 10 seconds to think that through. Okay, but does that make it Does that make it like really morally acceptable? Like, you're saying like, oh, like it's for utility and all that, but like that was just a precise case, and I just
Right,
wanted
it's
to
one
clarify that.
justification.
So like,
So the
if
way
we're
I
talking,
see it,
yeah,
yeah, the way I see it, there's at least two routes. One of the routes is the plants are sentient, therefore they suffer. And so to reduce the suffering, should eat less plants. Best way to eat less plants is to actually eat plants. The other part of it is plants aren't sentient, and so we should be making reasoned decisions. And reasoned decisions would mean to be effective and efficient, and that would mean to eat plants.
right. So why does suffering matter to
That's
you?
under one justification.
Right, but I mean, like you just brought up suffering and sentience, so you
Sure,
brought it up, but we
suffering
can't talk about it.
suffering is generally bad.
Like suffering is generally bad, but you're still willing to kill people, to kill plants.
Right, when there's justifications. There are plenty of bad things that are still considered, or there's plenty of things that are generally bad that in the scenario we would say it's still moral to do those things.
I mean, that isn't that sort of like just a way of saying it and not actually like meaning it.
What do you mean?
Like there's a lot of things we say without meaning it because of the culture.
I don't see how those relate.
Well, let me give you an example. Like let's say um a soccer player wins a match and people are like, "Oh, he's a hero. He's a hero. He's our savior." Well, that's almost like that's too much for the situation. And then the same way, saying it's moral would maybe be too much for the situation.
I'm still not sure that I'm understanding
Well, I mean,
the point that it's too much.
well, look at it this way. It's interesting to me that when we're talking about reasons, you bring all those reasons, but when we're testing like the arguments, it always comes back to, I guess, economy, right?
I'm giving you two alternative reasons, but in
Right.
both alternative reasons, it still comes out that it's moral to eat plants.
No, because those like the cases you're saying like are that it's moral to eat plants because it's justified, because I can justify it. But at the same time, you said if I didn't have utility for it, I would not eat plants, right? So
No,
we
these
can
are
see
two.
that
They're two. I mean, all puns intended. Two branches of the same tree.
of your tree, but at the same time, I feel like it's not really moral, like because you admitted that if you did not need it, you would not eat plants. So
I
you feel
wouldn't
like
eat
it's bad
plants
to eat plants.
because it would be inefficient. If there was no reason to eat plants, why would I spend time, money, and effort eating plants?
So, for example, if it was more efficient to kill humans, you would eat humans.
Sure.
Really?
I mean, if there were no other options, then it would be justified.
No, just more efficient.
Sure, why not?
Really?
If the most efficient way to live was to eat humans, let's do it.
Yeah. I think that's absurd.
It is a little bit absurd. I
Yeah.
agree. It's pretty absurd to say that.
I mean, like,
But if our morality is based off of efficiency, to be consistent, we should do that. But I think we also have to consider the whole suffering standpoint. And while causing one tiny bit of suffering is bad in isolation, when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, it's better to cause the least amount of suffering possible.
so you would choose suffering over efficiency.
Personally, sure, but if that's not your gig, that's not your gig.
I mean, my gig is that we would have to kill. We should not kill anything. That's my gig. But
Well, so then our central tenet, our central disagreement is that it's right to keep yourself alive.
no, that's not our central. I'm just saying, like, you seem not to base your decisions on sort of like a really defined rule that applies to everything. You seem to base your decisions on what constitutes overall the best option for you, and I don't think that's morality.
So how about this then? Let's just leave the efficiency thing behind.
Okay.
And say that efficiency really isn't morality, because I would personally agree with that. I still think reducing suffering is a moral thing to do.
Okay, so for example, I find that I would value how amazing the creature is over, or the plant is over over suffering.
Because you personally find it astounding and amazing?
Like,
well, if that's not subjective, I don't know what is.
Yeah, so like, I'm not saying that in the context of like proposing my morality, because my morality would be that we should not kill everything, but I just say like that in my perspective, like, amazingness is more like, under not kill everything, like I would say amazingness is more valuable than suffering. So I feel like we have a disagreement, and I would like to know your reasons why you think suffering is such an important matter
versus aesthetic wonder.
It's not aesthetic, it's like how positive it is for the world.
So because something is amazing, it has more value than something that has the capacity to suffer?
Yeah.
I mean, it is subjective wonder. I know you say it's not subjective wonder, but you can be amazed by things that somebody else is very much not amazed by.
Okay, so I mean, I guess we could debate if it's subjective wonder, but at the same time, I could also say that, like, you choosing suffering, in my opinion, is subjective. Like, over.
I don't get to decide whether something suffers.
No, not you. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying like you subjectively like determine who suffers or not. I'm just saying like you choosing that criteria to me seems subjective. Because, for example, I choose amazingness.
I mean,
so I just like to know like why
is suffering wrong?
No, why that is at the top of your list. But because I'm not disagreeing that suffering is also something I would consider as a bad effect, but I would just like to know like why is that so high on your list?
Because it is universal and recognizable and awful. It's an awful sensation in yourself. And so it's a power of empathy to say, because it's awful to me, it must be awful in them.
Interesting.
Whereas amazingness, you can show me something that you think is just the coolest shit in the world. I mean, have you been around elementary schoolers? They think some really weird things are super cool.
Okay, do you think a plant can benefit or lose something?
Can you rephrase?
Okay, so you're saying like the animal is suffering. So what I'm getting from that is that the animal is suffering. It's bad. He's getting, we're having a negative effect on this animal. But like, I would just want to ask you because, like, I mean, I just have the idea that maybe because plants don't have, what is commonly called as conscience, because they don't have a brain, then they don't have a perspective. And then we cannot say they have a negative, something negative happens to them or something positive because
Right.
they're
And
not conscious of it.
if they're not conscious and they can't suffer, then they don't have moral weight because they can't suffer. And then it's okay to eat them.
So, okay, so for example, if there was a tree in front of me and I cut the tree, in terms of the tree, we shouldn't care about what sort of like, I mean, I hate to say it because it's such a bait, but like, we shouldn't care about what the tree thinks because it doesn't think anything, right?
Right. Well, I mean, there's two alternatives here. Either the plants are sentient and they can feel pain, and in which case we should seek to reduce that pain, or they're not sentient and they don't feel pain, in which case we don't have to give them moral weight.
So, for example, if we were talking about like insects, because insects don't feel anything, it's okay to eat them.
Hey, that's a weird assumption to make.
No, I'm just asking you.
So it's
Like,
the
because
same thing. Either insects are sentient and do feel pain, in which case we can to ameliorate that pain, or they don't feel pain, in which case they don't deserve moral certainty. And you can extend that to anything you want. Tables, rabbits, either it's sentient or not.
yeah,
But
well,
in any matter, either it's sentient and it feels pain and we should reduce that pain, or it's not sentient and it doesn't give moral weight. Under both tracks, it ends up that eating plants creates the least amount of suffering.
right. Okay, so let me give you my problem with that view of the world. Um, no, none of us can put ourselves into the shoes of an animal. We can only base ourselves on what we observe from this animal. So, for example, when we go to an animal and we do something that would threaten his self preservation, and we see that he fears, when we actually hit him, see him screech or things like that, then we deduce that this animal feels pain, right? That he is conscious of
It's one
what's
method.
happening around him, right?
It's
But if you actually, for example, like if you put a 2 seconds, okay, just wait like 20 seconds. I'm gonna have to change devices. Right, I'm back.
Oh,
Okay.
right.
So just from those external symptoms, we commonly deduce that the animals is having this negative perception of the event, right?
I mean, it's not the only way to deduce that, but sure.
Okay, well, for example, if you put a plant in a box and there's only one source of light, the plant will naturally search for the light.
Right, but is it consciously perceiving that it's searching, or is it response to stimulus? Because even comatose bodies that don't have any sort of consciousness respond to stimulus.
Well, I mean, if you talk about an animal, for example, like an animal cannot use, for example, words to think the situation through. He's also reacting to stimulus.
He is reacting to stimulus, but part of that reaction is a pain reaction, and it's a physical phenomenon that is visible through brain scans and through measuring the cortisone in a body. And I mean, animals are very similar to humans in respect to their physiology. And so it's a fair assumption to be able to say that, oh, well, our brains are very similar, and we cortisone and these hormones, and we can see these parts of the brains lighting up in brain scans when something painful happens. And so it's not a hard jump to make.
Right, but it's still a jump in a way.
And then it's reinforced through the kind of mechanism you talked about, where if pain is induced, you see it, and they make the screeching noises, and so you're confirming internally and externally. And I mean, to go down the path of, well, it's still a jump. I mean, we're going to refute every scientific advance because of that.
I mean, the science has definitely gone towards that direction, and challenging the science would probably maybe challenge years of work. But I would rather have a science that is right than a science that value the time of work. So I mean, so like for example, there are plants such as like there are those plants that can close their mouth to eat, for example, flies. So we can see that even plants can produce pretty complex mechanisms such as a mouth closing. But
I mean,
if
it's
there was
still a response to stimuli. There's no, we as far as we know, there's no conscious thought that goes chomp onto the fly. It's these little tiny hairs inside that part of the plant that when those hairs are moved, that's the trigger.
Yeah, but like in the same way, when the animals is hit, that is the trigger for him to feel pain because there's those wires called nerves in his body too.
And it's the same for humans, but we're pretty sure that they have a similar pain response that we do. And so if you want to argue that plants feel pain, that's fine by me, because if they feel pain, we should eat less plants to reduce suffering. And the best way to eat the least amount of plants is to not eat animals. And what do we have after that? Plants.
Well, no, we would in the future we could have food that is created from, like, for example, uh, modifying the atoms of like a rock.
So when we have food that's produced by alchemy, that will be a different debate.
Well, I mean, that is sort of like that may be one argument I think you could put, but like I feel, yeah, like I feel like the general case here is really interesting because we can really see that it's not really like good. I would like, in my opinion, I would say it's not moral, but then we do it because of utility. And so I feel like in my own like,
Oh, but
I know
it's more
you're not going to agree
moral
with that.
to
I know.
reduce pain.
Well, I mean, for example, I would argue that killing a plant just because it cannot feel pain is in my opinion, not more moral than killing, than like not killing, than not discriminating. Because, like, to me, the plant has her systems, tries to reproduce, it tries to live. Um, it can have many systems which are very, like, it can produce many systems that are very similar to animals or even humans, right? So to me, you know, suffering is really it sort of resembles our way of navigating the world, because when we suffer, that's our way of, that's our mechanism. But plants don't have the suffering mechanism, but they have other mechanisms. I don't think just because the animals resemble us that it should
But are we not
make
the
it.
ones that make morals, unless you're arguing for some sort of natural law in which we have to discover more? I think humans make the system of ethic.
So you would say, like, animals are okay to, like, slaughter because they don't resemble us too much.
No, the opposite. They do resemble us and they do feel pain, and so it's wrong.
Right,
It's
but that
wrong
would
to
be,
needlessly slaughter.
yeah, but like, so
Because as
you
humans, we have this advanced ability to be able to weigh right and wrong.
I would agree with the fact that we create morals because we are the only species that's able to do it. But at the same time, to me, like, saying we should save this because it resembles us seems very weak.
It's not because
That's an
so it does
argument.
resemble us, and that's a true fact. But its resemblance is how we know it suffers. The suffering is the key part, not the resemblance.
Um, I mean, if you look at, like, scientific history, it's not because something resembles something that they're identical.
No,
So
they're absolutely not identical, but through you know through internal science, through external testing, through
internal
empathy,
science.
through behavior, well, right, through brain scans and through measuring
Oh, okay.
hormones. Um, we have ethnology that tests behavioral choices in animals. We have ways that we're pretty damn sure that other animals feel pain.
For example, like, to me, in the same way a tree, you know, evades going in the path of a rock, to me that
And a
is
ball rolls down a hill.
no, because a bull is that's just that a bull is not alive. A tree, can adapt to the environment. It can be stimulated by different circumstances and define what is the best plan for it, not in the
But
way of
it's not doing
thinking.
any calculus. It's not
Yeah,
doing any
not in the
weighing
way
of,
of
oh,
thinking.
should I go over here? Should I grow over here?
But I mean,
It's a product of evolution that the sunlight,
the
the
animal
plants that happen to go that way are going to reproduce more.
the animal is not thinking either. The animal is very primitive. Also, the animal is acting by instinct.
Not in all cases. Animals do make choices. There's a whole field of behavioral science about it.
Well, for example, what animal?
We witness it in most mammals, birds, bats. I mean, bats are mammals, but
So, what kind of, like, thinking can they do, in your opinion?
so so they can make altruistic choices. They have preferences about what they would like to eat that day, and so there are even records kept of, oh, today the rat ate these berries instead of these berries.
Okay, show me that
It's in
that's not
some
instinct. For me, that's not
Eating is an
instinct.
instinct.
Yeah, but thinking is different from just instinct.
I'm
That's what I'm
still not
saying.
sure how this is weighing
Yeah,
on plant
exactly.
debate.
Like, uh, I'll just show you. Like, if the animals are making decisions by instinct and they're not thinking, then you saying that
Then they
uh,
can't paint?
no. Then you saying that the plant is different because it doesn't have a choosing process, in my opinion, is not really true, because the plant has her own mechanisms of making discriminations or quote unquote choices, and the animal too, but both don't think. Both are moved by evolutionary like mechanisms, and they're still different from humans who can think. So you said animals can make choices, so I thought, oh, you're gonna show me that animals can think. But in
Yeah.
fact, and you said, oh, there's a whole behavioral science about it. But in fact, then you say, oh, yeah, they're doing it by instinct, but I don't see how that doesn't prove that they're suffering. I'm not this.
Here we go.
Did you link something?
There you go.
Where did you link?
Debate chat.
Okay. Yeah, like I also want to say, like, we can maybe do a follow-up, but like I would like to end this debate like in 10 minutes, so not to go for hours.
Right. So I'm not really sure how it matters if something can make a choice or not. Can it suffer?
Yeah, I said like choosing animals over plants because they can suffer is, based on how like they resemble us, right? They have they have like aspects we can sympathize with because they resemble us, right? But for example, if you look at, for example, um, when we went, I mean, or when our ancestors went and enslaved black people just because they didn't resemble us, then you could say, you could justify that too.
But
So I don't think.
you're conflating that we empathize with them because they are like us versus we know they suffer because they have similar physiology.
I'm not.
It's not the same. It's not that I can look at something and say it's similar to me and so I like it. And I mean that does happen. That's not to say it doesn't, because it does, but it's different from saying I have a brain that has two cortexes and this side does this and this side does this. And when I'm hurt, these neurons fire versus here's another brain. It also has two cortexes. This side does this side does this. And when we do something we would think would probably hurt it, it should fire, and then it does.
Yeah, I'm not. I feel like you think I'm making a confusion because somehow we challenge that animals suffer now, but like that was something that was challenging like maybe 10 minutes ago. Right now, what I'm saying is that just because animals have suffering, which is something like us, and so we empathize with it, doesn't mean we should value them higher than, for example, plants who have other systems of adapting and surviving, but that don't resemble us. And I just showed the example of us finding black people and enslaving them because they didn't resemble us, when in fact,
But
it's
that's
not
not
about
an
the
accurate
resemblance.
comparison.
What?
It's not an accurate comparison.
I'm not really trying to compare here. I'm just saying, like, making an analogy where I'm saying, like, choosing something because it resembles us, I don't think is the moral choice.
But it's the best we have.
I don't think so.
I mean, you said it yourself. I can't know the subjective experience of any other living being other than myself. And so humans as a collective that come up with morality and ethics, we have to work with what we have. And right now, the best that we have is we know that we suffer and we're very sure that other beings suffer. However, I can never even begin to imagine the subjective experience of a raspberry plant. And so, as humans developing this social contract and as this ethic, we have to use what we have because that's it. That's all
Well,
there is for us.
okay, well, see, I don't agree with you because, for example, I use my computer and I can even develop some sort of like attachment to my computer, yet my computer doesn't resemble me. And in the same way, I could, you know, I mean, not that I would, but hypothetically, I could discriminate more plants than animals because I see more good things in them than animals, right? And so I don't think we should choose animals because they resemble us. We should choose animals because there's definite more reasons why we should choose them.
I don't understand the computer part because if your computer gets smashed, it's not feel anything. It doesn't deserve weight as far as suffering goes.
Yeah, the computer part is because you said like, oh, that's the best we have. So in other words, like if I have this science that, seems to show something, and that's our scientific, improvement up until now, then that's what we have to base ourselves. When in fact, for example, under under the name of religion, and here's why I'm using this example because the science right now is showing, but it's not. You have to take a leap, and in the same way, you have to take a leap when you believe in religion. Religion has also created examples where we burned witches. Well, we believe were witches. And so not only is the science right now, you know, leading us to take a leap, but also I would say it's not because we right now are able to do something and discriminate right now like that we cannot be better, right? And so that's why I showed my computer, which is like, oh, I can actually develop even affection for my computer, even though it doesn't resemble me.
Yeah, again, the resemblance isn't really the operative fact here
Yeah, so then why should we choose animals because they suffer?
because suffering is bad.
Right, but
It sounds simple, but
you cannot explain
that's what
why
we
suffering
have.
is bad, right? Yeah, but like see, like it's not because you're not willing to dig deeper into why you think that's bad that's all we have. Like it's
I
not
mean,
because
I'm
you
still pretty sure that suffering should be avoided because it's painful and it hurts and it's bad.
well, okay, but you cannot, coherently describe why that is.
I think to do so would distract from the central argument of eating plants is wrong because suffering aside, either the plants are sentient and they suffer. And you know what? Even if we want to abandon that because, say, we can't prove the ridiculous prose that suffering is bad, then fine, let's abandon the suffering to plants don't suffer. Let's eat the plants. Because why not? Because we need to live. I need to live.
Right, so it's about utility.
And under both thoughts seems to be that we can eat plants.
No, okay, so um like the suffering aspects to me, in some ways makes a lot of sense because
Oh, okay, we're
it's
going back to suffering.
like, well, I mean, that's what we're talking about. Like, if that's because if you look at an animal and it resembles you, then you have more empathy towards it because that's something you can empathize with easily. But to me, that doesn't make sense. Now, with the utility, you said it's not the utility that matters in moral decision. So now you're coming back on your earlier claim,
I'm
right?
just saying either one, either one. Or you know what? Here's the third one.
So
It
it doesn't
takes
matter.
less human suffering to farm plants than it does animals. It causes less environmental damage, causes less human suffering.
Right. So it would be about preserving ourselves, right?
And if that's the system of ethic you choose, plants still seem to be edible.
Right. I don't like. I'm gonna have to end it there, but I don't think that's a good basis for morals.
Okay.
Are you good? Like, do you want to add something?